Hello, good morning, everybody. Welcome to our webinar today on modernising IBM development. So hopefully everybody's with us now. We can make a start. Andrew, next slide, please. So here's what we're going to run through today. The plan is to give as much time as possible to talk through the solution around development and also show you the solution in action. I'm very privileged to be joined by three other leaders in this area. So we have Andrew and Michelle from Arcad, and Richard Field from Skytap. Firstly, just to let you know that this meeting is being recorded for anybody who can't catch it today. Okay, next slide, please. So just quickly before we do jump in, I just wanted to give you a few minutes just about Northdoor, who we are. Some of you may never have come across us before. So we've been around for about 30 plus years. Northdoor started in the financial services sector. Have always been around the mid-range solution with IBM, so I-Series, IBM as it is now. Although we started in the financial sector, we've diversified to pretty much everything, but always following this data-centric solution approach, and also very much a kind of a listening consultancy approach, as opposed to just trying to take a solution to market. So we have two partners, Microsoft, we're a gold partner on many sections, and also IBM. So one of the reasons that we've wanted to look at this today is we've been working on helping customers improve their DevOps and streamline on the Microsoft side for some time. But what we're finding is that whilst the IBM platform is a fantastic platform, regardless of the resilience and the reliability that it has, it's sometimes seen as being a legacy platform by some other business users because it can't use some of the more modern development tools that you might be finding in the Microsoft estate. So what we really wanted to do is try to bring those two worlds together today, so that you could understand how you could start modernizing development on IBM more into the same structured and streamlined approach to give you faster, more agile development. Okay, next slide, Andrew. So last slide on Northdoor. So on the left-hand side, the blue section, we basically split what we could do into four sections. So data, cloud and infrastructure, which is where IBM traditionally sits, applications and security. So we have deep technical knowledge in all of these. And the plan is to be able to take the four sections in yellow into each of those blue quadrants. So modernization, optimization, governance and automation. So for instance, at the moment, we are heavily involved in low code or infrastructure as code projects, trying to help clients automate what they're doing more, being able to respond faster to requirements. And from a security perspective, things like NIST2 and DORA are taking a lot of our time at the moment. So everything that we do tends to be aligned to a requirement that you have within your industry. And then a managed service wrap, basically to cover any of those solutions that we take to market. We've got the skills and depth of expertise to be able to cover proactively for you. So hopefully that's a quick introduction to Northdoor. What we really wanted to do to give us the majority of the time today for the solution that you've come to see. So I'll hand over to Andrew with that. And Andrew, please continue.
Thank you very much. Right, so just a bit about the solution today, a bit about Arcad to start with. Arcad has been around for 31 years now, 32 years, focused very much around helping IBM customers modernize their application development processes. Been involved in a number of different areas, really started in the change management area, but we evolved and also do things around modernizing your code, deploying it, anonymizing data. So full plethora throughout our history. Very tightly integrated with IBM. We have a long-term relationship with IBM. IBM actually sell Arcad and have done for about 15 years now. Recently, we've been involved with IBM in the fact that we co-built the Merlin solution with IBM. So under the covers of Merlin is the Arcad solution on there. We are international. We operate with offices in the US, Hong Kong, Germany, India, and most recently, Singapore. One of the other big things recently, which impacts today's conversation, is we built a tight integration to VS Code. which has become the de facto standard IDE. I won't go through this in a lot of detail, but our four areas of focus are DevOps around the I, modernizing IBM I applications, managing releases of applications across all platforms, and test data manager, where we're extracting data maybe out of production environment and anonymizing that for testing purposes, but still maintaining the data integrity. So Andrew becomes David, your bank sort code becomes a different bank sort code, but still a valid bank sort code. We're global, as I mentioned. We have a 24/7 support through places like India, France, US, on there, China, approaching 5,000 licenses and 500 customers worldwide now. Right, that was enough about Arcad. Just a bit about what's happening in development as a whole. And what we've really seen is the evolution of development over the last sort of 15, 20 years. And it's changed quite dramatically. So what we saw about 20 years ago was the uptake, maybe a bit longer than that, even 25 years ago, the uptake of object orientation, where people are starting to reuse code, write smaller individual components, but reuse them. Then we saw the move towards Agile, where traditionally, and still very common in the I world, we use a waterfall type approach where we deliver something every few months. In an Agile world where we might be actually delivering smaller components, a minimum viable product often, but we might be doing that in a 3 times a week or twice a week type process. So that fundamental change, and the big advantage Agile has is with those sprints, the ability to actually deliver something that quite often fits better with the customer needs on there, because you're constantly getting feedback from them. Yes, no, tweak this. Then we saw the evolution of microservices. Really, again, reusable bits of code that can sit on multiple different platforms, consumed by code on various other platforms. So that real small, driven by Agile on there, where we're delivering smaller more often. And when we're actually in a waterfall approach, manual processes quite often are fine. I would still suggest you should have some management, change management to manage your changes of code, but doing things manually, deploying things manually when you're deploying in a waterfall approach quite often will work. As we move to a more agile approach and we're doing more iterations, that's just not practical. If we're doing 3 releases a week, managing that process manually becomes unsustainable. And that's really where DevOps grew out of the move towards agile and microservices. And DevOps is really about automating development and operations and automating the processes for that. And then most recently, we won't touch too much on that today, is value stream management. Value stream management is really about capturing all the data of what's happening in that DevOps environment and using that to actually feedback and optimize your DevOps approach. So in the non-I world, what are we seeing happen? Well, first of all, DevOps is the norm. For a lot of you who've got I shops where you have maybe a Java or a .NET development as well, you probably are using DevOps for your .NET and Java on there. We've seen a quick evolution of the browser to be more, the IDE to be more browser-based. So that's changed very recently. Often people are consuming things in a hybrid mode. So they might be consuming, something like Jira in the cloud, and they might be doing other things on-premise. So that combination of in the cloud and on-prem is the norm. Move towards web services. And what we've also seen is a standardization in tooling. So things like Jenkins and Azure pipelines are by far the most dominant automation tools in the DevOps process. Git has become the repository that everybody stores their source on across environments. So for instance, one example of that is GitHub, which is the biggest Git provider. Actually, you reckon at the moment they have roughly 100 million developers using Git today. Jira or ServiceNow or Azure are becoming the de facto norms for ticketing. Quite often they're integrated into a Git repository. And rapidly we've seen VS Code become the norm for IDEs. The other interesting movement is obviously we've seen move towards containers of deployment, but also infrastructure as code, where you're starting to define your environment as code on there, often with things like Ansible and other things where we actually provision the infrastructure on the fly, maybe for a test environment, etc. So the definition of the system becomes code stored in Git. In the I world, if we want to modernize, there are certain key things that we need to address. Fundamentally, we need to start moving from fixed format to free format. I started as an RPG2 and RPG3 developer in the 80s, where fixed format was the only option. And fixed format, comes off punch cards. It's very much based on old technology. But we can very rapidly move to ILE free format RPG and move into a modern language, modern world, something that the next generation developers are going to be able to understand. Also in the I world, our code is quite large. A large Java application might be 1 million lines of code. In the I world, it's common for it to be 5 to 10 million lines of code written over 30 years on there. So understanding what's in that code is absolutely critical. We also need to start moving away from mega programs. I remember we used to have a payroll calculation program in the late 80s that used every indicator at least once on there. And we all hated picking it up because it took you about 2 days to figure out what was going on. We're now in a world where we need to start refactoring those monolithic type programs into smaller modules on there. Also in the I world, one of the critical things is we also know that if I change certain things, it has an impact on what needs to be recompiled. I change a physical file, I need to manage the logicals, the views, and all the programs that use them on there. So we have quite complex builds compared to, say, a Java environment where they will just deploy everything every time on there. And we're moving away from having all of the logic embedded in every program to exposing it more as a service and consumption-based model on there. As I mentioned, traditionally we stored the source on the I. We need to move to actually storing it in a Git repository. So we have all of our enterprise code stored in one Git repository. And the other big thing to modernize is we need to move away from the traditional PDM, SEU, SDA type tools to a modern IDE. So what we're going to talk about today is very much about embracing standards in a DevOps world. One of the things we've seen rapidly over the last few years is VS Code become the norm. So if you go speak to a Java or PHP developer or a C# developer, he's probably using VS Code to do his coding on there. And we can do that with RPG. The OpenStack do a regular survey, and their 2022 survey pointed out that 81% of all the developers who responded were using VS Code as their standard IDE. Now that's a transformation because in 2017 they did a survey and it was only 7%. We need to automate the DevOps process, and that's where things like Azure pipelines become absolutely critical. It's one of the two leading tools in this area, helping you actually automate and speed up your delivery capabilities. And as we mentioned, Git has become the source repository of record for most companies. Almost all open source solutions now are stored in Git. Something like 93% of all code out there is now stored in a Git repository. But these tools don't understand the IBM I. They don't understand what good RPG or COBOL coding standards are. They don't understand how to convert fixed format RPG into modern free format RPG. They don't have any concept of a dependency build. If I change a physical file, what is the impact? They don't manage ILE or DDS files. They don't understand the relationships we have with there and how we handle things like non-source objects. And that's really where we bring that I uniqueness to these tools. But what we're going to talk about today is the Arcad DevOps tools for Azure. One of the nice things about it is you can pick the IDE of choice. So you can use VS Code. We'd highly recommend it's an excellent IDE. You can use RDI. And if you really have to, you can use 5250, though we would suggest at this point it would make sense to move to a modern environment. 5250 PDM really is limiting you. And we will talk about, we have the ability within the solution to actually understand your application. One of the things we do when we load the application is we actually will load it and it gets loaded into a meta repository that understands all the relationships of all your fields, files, programs, etc. We can then query that. So as a developer, I can actually in VS Code look at where's this field file used. I can then drill down all the way through the relationships on there. We'll also cover integration with Git, with the Azure repo on there. Also built into the solution is the ability to push a button in, say, VS Code and transform my fixed format RPG into modern free format RPG very, very rapidly. One of the critical bits, as I mentioned earlier, is that these tools don't understand the dependency builds, how an IBM programs, files, fields, etc. have a relationship. And then we actually have a product called Builder that integrates with these tools that will actually do the dependency build for you and understand that relationship. We'll talk a bit about Code Checker. Code Checker is the ability to actually define RPG and COBOL coding standards in your company and have it automatically check your code. So what is my naming convention? How many nested loops do I allow, etc. And less so today, we won't touch too much on it, but we also have the ability to use things like iUnit, which is unit testing for RPG and COBOL, and Verifier, which is regression testing. And then with drops, we can then deploy across all platforms, Windows, Linux, even Z if you have it on there. And that can either be on-prem or that can be in the cloud. So that's a quick overview. I'm now just going to show you a couple of screens, then hand over to Michelle. We also can help you with a load of application information, so we understand, what type of code, etc., that you've got, unused objects, etc. We can actually look at the code quality of your existing RPG and COBOL code on there. How large your programs, how complex are they, etc. We can look at how long what's your deployment frequency, how much you're deploying, when are you deploying, etc. Right, so I'm now going to hand over to Michelle to actually show you all of this in action.
Great, thanks, Andrew. So just while Michelle's loading, what I meant to mention earlier, there is a Q&A section at the bottom. So if you do have any questions, obviously your microphones are muted, but please put them in the Q&A and then we can pick them up from there.
Yes, thank you guys. So let's switch to, let me share my screen to show you the reality of what explained Andrew. Okay, so I guess you are seeing my screen now.
Yeah,
so let's start by, let's start with where I am, where I'm working. In fact, so we are working in Skytap. So in fact, my environment will run in Skytap, and this is an example of environment in Skytap with different machines. So you can see we have in one single network, I would say virtual network, IBMI partitions, two IBMI partitions, could be dev, could be test, prod, as you want. We have here Windows to all some functionalities, and also I have a Linux, but I guess in this case it will not be used as I'm using Azure. I have some services, in fact, in this that could be also on Windows. So mainly I need Windows Server and IBMI to do all the job. And let me switch on the environment. So here, let me remove that stuff. So we are, as said Andrew, so we are in this example working with Azure. I just come back to say that Andrew mentioned Git. So for Azure DevOps is based on the Git repo. We can handle any kind of Git repository. So it's again an illustration of what we have with Azure on this demo. What's happened? So we have loaded some repository, and I open, you saw the green screen before, just to show you the interaction in between. I have loaded a repository in which it's an application in which you find classical IBMI elements. So you will retrieve, for example, RPG code, okay, that is available in the Azure DevOps repository. For sure, we will not use this screen to edit IBMI elements. As said Andrew, Azure don't understand what is an IBMI code and don't interact with IBMI code. So it's where we will use a connection with VS Code, and I will show that in a few seconds. Before that, I just want to get back to one point, is about the fact that we are supporting with Azure DevOps, we are supporting to work with green screen. So this, for example, here, green screen is accessing to sources that are stored in Azure DevOps, and we can do modifications still in green screen. As said, Andrew, for sure, we are pushing modernise code. So it's why more or less we will not have too much customers that still using that. But it's an important point to say that we have this hybrid capability to bring you where you are, even if you are still using green screen, to bring you from this position to the more modern orientation and sharing your source with an Azure DevOps, and having a progression in the usage of Azure DevOps, starting by maybe just green screen, but using already the repository on Azure DevOps. We also have the capability in RDI, that is, I would say, the base standard for IBMI development. And again, all of that is connected together. So in fact, what I'm doing here, or what I will do in here, it's the same thing, okay? So this is VS Code, in which you can find, I have access to the source code, so I can access to my repository. I can see everything on that, so you can see the source code in RPG, and we are using and we are developing functionality in VS Code to allow VS Code to understand IBMI development. So there is Code for I that probably, if you are IBMI and searching for modern tool, you know already. So, and we work with Code for I, but also we have developed a set of extensions. So you will see a different extension here, Arcad Elias, Arcad for IBMI Server Manager, but also what was done by with Code for I. And this provides a capability to manage components. So here I have an example of repository of my application. Azure Co is the application that I showed you a few seconds ago in Azure. And we have the capability to do impact analysis, to do code analysis. And you can see here, for example, I'm displaying an RPG program, ORD 200. I can, from even this IRT 201, I can have directly, and thanks to VS Code modernized environment, have capability to do impact analysis on the fly on that, to retrieve all the components that are using this file, find the parent file, so the physical file of this logical file, so having all the information that are IBMI-centric and required for IBMI developer to work correctly. One of the major points that mentioned Andrew is the capability to build. And it's important to have this capability on IBMI due to the strong dependency between objects. If some of you are developer on IBMI, you know that we use dynamic copy management. So that makes when you modify your program, when you want to compile it, you need to access to the objects corresponding for the file to be able to compile correctly, because it reuses the metadata of a file to build the program. So it's where it's important to have all this knowledge. And we have this knowledge and have put all this knowledge in the VS Code area. So, so I can do the modification, whatever I want, which tool I want. So in this tool, so this is the view of the repository. I can have an access to the same component in my branch. We are using Azure DevOps. So let me switch back to Azure just to explain a little bit that quicker. So we have a repository. In this repository, we have created branch. I have different branches that have been created in this environment. And in these branches, I have already a set of objects with some modifications that are available. So you can see that I did some tests yesterday before this meeting, and being able to do some modification. I can access to that, etc. Again, we will not do the change here. We will do the change in the better position that is possible. I can see the same change, the same code here. And here you will see this component with the modifications that have been done. So I just before show the reference version, the master, and here now I'm showing the one in the branch that I'm working on. Okay, so just to say that it's very seamless, very transparent for the developer. You are working as usual with the preferred tool you have, and everything under the cover is managed by the notion of branches, the notion of source code management, SCM, that provide Azure DevOps itself. Okay. So let's go on that. So I can also effectively, and just to prove maybe that it's very interoperable, I can, for example, do a modification in this area. Okay, so and I can add some few things here just to go quick on the demo. I save that. I can work on green screen. I can compile in RDI if I would prefer. I can compile here. I can compile from the green screen, so I can do whatever I want regarding the source code. It's totally just a question of interface. And in fact, I will synchronize that to the source code management. I'm doing a commit, if some of you are familiar with Git. So I am committing my modification to push it back to the branch into the Azure DevOps. And you will see that in a few seconds, it will appear. Let me go down a little bit on the repo. There will be a message that will indicate that I have modifications that have been sent on that repository. So I can have a look to the commit. I will see the commit just now. You can see committed by Arcad Skipper. It's me. I just committed my modification. So you can see there is a message in Azure. So this is the advantage of having such items. So, and you can create a pull request. I'm following a standard cycle that is common in Azure. So creating a pull request. I want to push this modification into a release I am preparing. So I will for example, push it in project 2. I have multiple releases in parallel of my application. Again, it's a big advantage to use Azure DevOps and the source code management of it. It will allow to manage parallel development, merge mechanism. Here I will do a merge mechanism. And so I will push this pull request, new pull request. So from my modification to my release, I can put some texts as usual at myself or someone else to put any message. Please check this, etc. So it's very common on IBM, on Git. And let me that. So, and let me create this pull request. This pull request will be sent to someone that will do the modification. In that case, I don't have any merge conflict. If there is merge conflict, the tool will propose me to this merge, and I can approve. So I am alone for this demo, so I approve myself. So I will approve, and I decide to complete this pull request. Just before to do this complete pull request, I want to show you a little bit the pipeline. We have a pipeline that is ready. So this pipeline includes different tasks. I will detail that after. And when I will complete my pull request, automatically it will send a message to the pipeline to indicate that he can start. So let me go back again to my pull request. Let me complete it. I'm happy with my modification. So I did the merge. I complete the point. And if I go now to the pipeline, you will see that the pipeline started automatically. We can have a look in this pipeline. And you will see that this pipeline, so I ran it yesterday already, but I can show you this job that is running. And this is the different actions that will happen on that. So let me wait for the build, in fact. The build is a more interesting part, finally. The build is taking care of what you have changed, analyzing the change, and pick up all the items that need to be rebuilt to have a consistency into the activity. So it's very important. This is Arcad Builder. Andrew talked about it. It's a major piece of the Azure features that we have developed to allow to compile correctly. Just for IBMI guys, I can show you that on that, some ones that are, sorry, that are, it's a job on the IBMI, okay, that is running and doing all the build. So compiling all items, all dependencies on that to take, for example, if we have changed a physical file, all the logical files, even if you don't change it, we have to regenerate them at least, or alter them if it's a table and view or index. We take the programs that have dependency in terms of format level, for example, we will compile everything. If there is a module in this, and this module is in fact used into a service program, we regenerate the service program, we update it, etc. So all of that is automatic, and you don't have to manage that because it's based on the knowledge base, the metadata of the Arcad repository, exactly the same one that was used to show this dependency here. When I do a click and ask for links, you see we know the dependency on all the item, and all these dependency, in fact, are coming from the Arcad repository. The Arcad open repository is totally linked with the change process, so that makes it automatically updating its contents while modifying, while compiling and building a new release of the application. So all of that is done automatically. I guess we are progressing on that Delta build. After that, in this pipeline, we will release the contents of the release. So the build was done correctly. Okay, and now we are create a release. And this release will be stored in a repository, an artifact repository, and then deploy to a UAT environment. So another environment, another instance of the application for doing testing, for example. Okay, so you see here all integrated in Azure DevOps feature. So we have a full integration with this item. You can even, for example, it was not the case in my pull request, put a work item if you are using work items, all the elements like that. I guess I am almost at the end of this demo. So just are waiting the deployment. So everything, again, if I go back to my very initial point, everything happens in the cloud. Everything happened, and the deployment can be seen in the green screen point of view. It can be seen. Let me maybe switch back to this. Can be seen from there. If, for example, ops, you see the jobs are on IBMI. So everything is done. It's fair log. If I just have a look to what's happened on this machine, my keyboard today. So this is all what happened today. So you can see the Azure version. So we take the source, we recompile a service program. All these elements are visible from green screen. They are visible also from this area. So I can ask for this, for example, to see the history. So we have to move to short screen. So exactly the same information that are available. Most of the time, IBMI operations are still using green screen, so it's why we have more the capability and the capability to be able to work on that area. And the deployment was done with the drops, in fact, under the cover. So it was done with the action. So this is the drops interface for now, and we can see take time, deployment plan. Again, this is running on the cloud. Okay, so it's so this is a UAT deployment I did, and if I want to follow from this point of view, it's another point of view of always the same thing. Deployment process. I have to connect. Deployment process. And just the deployment that was start date here. So this is the deployment. So just to show you what is the deployment steps. Again, it's just another vision of the same item. So transfer, receive, installation, deployment, publish the log, etc. So restore save file, because on IBMI, it's a save file to do this deployment. So all the traceability is available from that area. Let me switch back to the webinar. So I guess the next step is what, Andrew, it's questions?
No, there's a couple slides.
Okay, a couple slides. So I stop my sharing. Don't hesitate to ask questions to the QA area of this webinar. I will answer immediately.
Right. Thank you very much, Michel. That was excellent. Obviously, if you'd like to get it more detailed, by all means, reach out. We've got some contacts at the end to do that. Right. Can I hand over to you, Richard?
Yeah, of course. Thank you, Andrew. So just a little bit of background here. As you saw, a lot of what Michel was showing you was running on an IBM I server, and that was running in the cloud, and that's the parts that Skytap deliver. So what Skytap is an offering to deliver IBM I and other power systems workloads in a public cloud, in this case in Azure. So we can deploy IBM I complete applications and infrastructure as a service in the public cloud on an entirely agile and utility basis. And as you saw, the pipeline elements were running in Azure, which means that your DevOps environment is very, very close to your IBM I instance. So what Michel was showing you was a real life representation of what you see briefly on the screen here, was IBM I running in the Skytap cloud in a local data center to where he currently was located. And this is available as a service through the Azure marketplace. So you can run your IBM I and other applications without change. There's no emulation, there's no refactoring. It runs entirely natively. So if that's of interest to you, then obviously you can contact us at the end, but I just wanted to give a little sort of context as to where this was running and what the capabilities are around this whole piece of modern deployment, modern integration with other tools, and what is capable within this more modernized way, which is the infrastructure in cloud, DevOps in cloud, and integrated in between the two. So obviously, if you've got any questions, please drop them in the Q&A or follow up with us afterwards. But otherwise, back to you, Tom.
Great, thanks all. So Andrew, next slide, please. Yeah, so just quickly sum up, because we do have a couple of questions to come on to. So basically, it's the next step. Hopefully you've enjoyed today. It's been useful, valuable to you. So what we'd like to do is extend the offer of a complimentary DevOps readiness assessment. So I'll let you, obviously read for yourself, but basically it will cover these 7 key areas, or 6 key areas around where you are today, where you'd need to be, and changes that we would recommend that you looked at. So it can be a good starting point if you're thinking this sounds good, but you're not quite sure what the first step would be. Out of that, you get a customized report, which would hopefully highlight the areas where you're strong on and those that might need a bit more action. And then obviously, if you like what you hear and you'd like to have an individual workshop with effectively discussing this and how this fit within your environment with Skytap, Arcad, and ourselves, then obviously that's fine as well. So there's a couple of contacts on the right hand side. Obviously, if you're an existing Arcad customer, you know Andrew well, then there's his details. Anyone who isn't, then I've put my email address there, so please get in touch with any questions. And then I think we've got a couple of questions and answers, or questions to be answered. Let me see. So the first one, let me fire this one at you, Richard. So questions come in. If I have my DevOps cloud on Azure, can I deploy an IBM in Skytap to test my code directly from Azure?
Yes, absolutely. Yes, good question. Thank you. Yes, that is exactly what you can do here. So if you are, as Michelle was showing you, you were doing some development work in an Azure-based DevOps environment, you can deploy that code directly to an existing cloud deployed Skytap instance, or even actually deploy an instance in Skytap to test that. So not only can you push the code there, as you saw, there was a sub file sent, but you can actually, using APIs into our toolset, actually deploy a new test virtual machine into an existing Skytap environment, force that code in there, do your testing, and then shut that environment down and remove it. So yes, that's entirely possible, and that all comes with the that agility of the integration of Azure, DevOps, and Skytap Cloud. So yeah, good question. Thanks, Tom.
Yes, and I can add that effectively in the deployment I did in Drops, so it was not the case, but you can have instantiation mechanism to effectively create this environment on the fly in Skytap and then deploy. Yeah.
And I see we have a similar question around development environments. So could I have the development environment in the cloud and my production on-prem? And absolutely on there. So what Northdoor are bringing to market is a cloud offering around development and DevOps, and not an issue with you actually then having the production on-premise. But of course, Richard's more than happy to also discuss with you about moving it from on-prem into the cloud. Oh
yeah, 100%. Yeah, definitely. Thank you.
The other question I got is, where does the code sit? So the answer is the master code sits in the Azure repo on there, and that can be in the cloud or it can be on-prem on there. But we actually also will put back to the eye a copy of that code to do things like the compiles. So we have to compile obviously on the eye, and then it's up to you whether or not you keep it, a copy of it there, or if you destroy it and just worry about the master, which is in the Azure repo. And again, that's any Git repository. So that could also be GitLab or GitHub, Bitbucket, etc. But in this particular case, we're talking about delivering Azure repo as a service in the cloud. Any other questions, Tom?
There's just one other one which I'll pick up, which is obviously, I think The question being, it can be a bit of a jump in skill set to move into the cloud and to take some of these take the next step. So the question is there any assistance with that? So yeah, very much. Whether it's just hand holding to help you migrate into the cloud, or whether it's looking at trying to help you streamline development with the new or a more modern approach that we've discussed today. That's certainly something we can help with, either as a one-off project, as a managed service. Obviously, we've got the skills here ready to help.
Could I add just to the back end of that is we also now have a course aimed at RPG developers, getting them into Git, because Git is a different environment for RPG. It works slightly different than we have traditionally developed on the I. So we actually have now built a special course aimed at helping RPG developers get familiar with Git.
Excellent. Thank you, Andrew. So I think we are pretty much at the top of the 45 minutes we've got here. So I guess all that's left is to thank everybody for listening in. Thanks to the speakers for your contribution today. Hopefully it's been valuable. And yeah, by all means, get in touch with any questions or any follow-ups that you'd like to see. So thanks very much.
Thank you. Thank you all.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Bye.